And welcome back. Thank you, Marcus. It's now 6 minutes past 3 on Thursday, the 19th of January, on this beautiful day. The forecast of rain and storms has not yet occurred, and we hope that they may be able to be diverted. We were talking just before the 3 o'clock news about ageing well and about the importance of ways that we can actually live a fulfilling life at every stage of our lives. And in the last week that I've been doing the show, we've talked to a number of people, and I thought it would be really a good opportunity to talk to ECH and David Panter, who took over the role a couple of years ago. And ECH is really tackling stereotypes about ageing, and also it's about being able to live in an environment that you feel safe, that you're happy, but that you're still making a significant contribution. Our number is 8223 0000, or our text line is 1999 1395, or on air at FiveAA.com.au. Please give us a call. David was happy to take your calls or any questions, or if you want to make any comments. David, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon.
David, let me first start by asking a little bit about the history of ECH and then how you came to accept the role to be running the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, we're a not-for-profit organisation that's been going now for over 52 years. We were set up in 1964 by a group of business people who were concerned about housing for war widows. And housing has really been our strong hand over the last 50-odd years. And we're now the biggest provider of bespoke housing for older people in the state. We've got 1,700 houses in 100 different locations. They get called retirement villages, but our model's not really your common conception of a retirement village. It's much more localised. They're not gated. They don't have resort-style facilities. And you'll see our houses all over the place. They tend to be in groups of half a dozen to 2 dozen, and just look like ordinary houses. It's not a ghetto for older people. And a couple of years ago, we made a big decision, because at that stage we were also running residential care homes, nursing homes, and we made a decision that we believed that more people wanted to carry on living at home and eventually, all things being equal, have a good and respectful death at home. And so we made the decision to sell our nursing home business so that we could focus entirely on enabling people to remain living independently in their homes for as long as they wish to. And that's not just about the houses we provide, but also in their own traditional, private family homes. So we provide a whole range of services, in-home care, but home maintenance, gardening, a whole range of services essentially to enable you to carry on living independently.
One of the interesting things, I lived in Victoria for 25 years, and one of the interesting things at a particular breakfast that I heard a few years ago is more than 50% of the people in Australia end up living within 5 kilometres of where they grew up, a radius. And particularly as you get older, one of the things that you want to do is be able to live where all your amenities and all the things you are familiar with that you can still use, whether it be the local news agency or where you get your petrol or buy your fruit and veg. It's so much more important to be familiar with that as you get older, and you don't want to be uprooted to somewhere completely different. And obviously ECH has thought about that, because you say 100 locations is very extensive.
Exactly, and that's absolutely our philosophy. We want people, if they want to move to an independent living unit, a smaller house, then we want them to be able to do that in the neighbourhood in which they currently live. Hence why we're spread over so many locations. It's also important to say that we also, again, with retirement villages, there's an issue about buying into them. We actually, 25% of our houses are rented. So we have a rental option for people as well, because we are, as a not-for-profit, targeted, at people who don't have some of the resources that others in the community have.
Which would have been so when you first started, and particularly this group of really community-minded, and were considering of how to house widows, did they buy those houses for them, or were they rented for them? How did that go about?
Essentially, the initial housing came about through a donation of a a large homestead in Walkerville that then got turned into a small group of houses. And then during the 70s and 80s, we continued to build more houses. We've just had a new village open in Warradale. In fact, the people are moving in this week. And that's just 8 units in Warradale. We've got 3 more villages under development during this calendar year. So we continue to build houses because we see there's huge need. But equally, we recognise that most people, because only about 7% of people over 60 actually do want to go to a retirement village or downsize to something. Most of us want to actually carry on living in our family home. That's where our memories are. That's where our experiences are.
And the other thing is too, with the way that children move in and out of the global world that we live in, they are likely to come back 2 or 3 times back into the family home. But you as an older person are much more active than the previous generations were too. So that you might still be working or part-time work or volunteering in your 60s and your 70s. You may be contributing to your grandchildren's life. They may be staying with you a couple of nights a week as babysitting and other duties. So the fact that going to something smaller may not actually suit the lifestyle, but you might need some assistance to be able to cope with what often can be a garden that might be a bit big or a bit too much maintenance around, and that's one of the other things that you can be doing for them.
Absolutely.
Still connected to ECH.
Absolutely, and I think we've done a lot of work over the last year or so in particular, looking at individual scenarios to understand why somebody made the decision or their family made the decision that it was time for mum or dad to go to a residential nursing home. And then we've looked at what were some of the factors in that, the triggers, and then how are the way in which we can assist with those triggers. Because again, just as you said, I mean, families are often very time poor. And as some of those house maintenance, those gardening issues, the making sure there's food in the cupboard, a whole range of things, if they fall on older children who are also then looking after their children still, then everybody becomes very pressured, and all too often the older person then says, well, I don't want to be a burden.
Yes, that's the famous words, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's one of the stereotypes we want to try and challenge, is that you don't need to be a burden. There are ways in which we can assist you and your family. In a positive way.
Absolutely. The other thing is, I think that as you get older, you don't want to ask for help. And then I have my mother's 83 and living in Melbourne, has grandchildren around the corner, and is in good fit form. But I know that if she wouldn't like to think that she'd have to ring if there's a problem, because she knows your lives are busy. But so therefore isolation can be a big issue. So if you have someone that's coming to assist in the house, whether it be housekeeping or laundry or gardening and things, it actually also keeps you connected to the rest of the world. And I think that's the other thing that's really important too.
Yes, again, I mean, that the fear of social isolation is one of those big triggers for why people think moving to a residential care home is the solution. Although often people find themselves lonelier when they've made that move.
And sometimes made them too soon.
Absolutely. So we've got a range of different services again to enable people to remain connected. Sometimes that's digitally. We've had huge success with people of all ages using sort of tablet devices with things like Skype on and Facebook to remain connected to family and connect to each other. But also we have a very active peer volunteering program, which is about people who are using our services volunteering for each other. So, we've got somebody who's living in their own home. It's an apartment. They're coming to one of our wellness centres for some physio activity, really passionate about gardening, but they don't have a garden. And somebody who's receiving care in their home lives around the corner. They're now doing the gardening for that person.
That is such a fabulous idea. That is really amazing. We have David Panter here from ECH, He's the CEO, and he's been talking to us about ECH and about the facilities, but more importantly, the services, which go so beyond what we traditionally may be aware is the housing that they can provide. We are going to take a short break and return with David. If you have any questions, please give us a call on 8223 0000. And welcome back. It is now 3:18, Thursday, January the 19th. We've just had a text from Pete, who's not very happy, which says, bloody power is out again up north. Burton, Waterloo Corner, St Kilda, etc. If anyone is having power difficulties or traffic difficulties, please let us know, because I'd love to know what's going on out there so we can inform all our listeners. David, our number is 82230000, and we've had Margaret from Grange who wants to know if your cut-off age of 65 is flexible. Can people under the age of 65 still enlist your help at home?
The 65 issue is about whether you're eligible for a federal government subsidy for the cost of the care. But there are other ways in which care costs can be covered, from people's own pockets or families, but also through other things which are available. We can look at that. So we're certainly happy to talk to people under 65. And indeed, there are some people, particularly, for example, younger people with dementia who use our services. And for our housing, because it's classed as retirement village, then actually 55 is technically the term, the age cut-off for our housing. We tend to be a slightly older group. It tends to be people in their mid-70s who move into our housing. But again, we're happy to have that conversation. Margaret just needs to give ECH a call.
And what number should she call on?
I just got that in my bag.
I just thought that might be the case. Margaret, if you're listening, and we'll put the number up on the screen.
Yeah, it's Ask ECH. So if you've use your numbers on your phone.
Ask ECH.
Yep.
Fabulous. And we'll get that to Margaret too. But that's a really interesting concept too, because age and services that are necessary don't always collate in terms of the physical age of someone.
Absolutely. That's actually, we've written that into our sort of mission, is recognising that we all experience age differently. I've got a family member who is the same age as me, 55, but who's got sort of chronic conditions and actually is in need of more support than some of the 90-year-olds that I can think of that we provide some services to. So age isn't, it's not about chronological age. It's about your well-being, your overall health.
And that's one of the other difficulties too, because of I assume that you may have some people that might not only have chronic health but might have some form of disability. We talked about dementia, but it might be physical disability too. Again,
that's often can be the case, and also because we as a society we're now doing much better at how we provide services to people with a disability. They too are living longer, and we often are faced with a situation where we've got elderly parents with an older child who's still living with a disability, and that's a key concern for them, and we work with the entire family.
I have a son-in-law whose older sister is 52. And she was what you would call spastic society then, still living at home. Her parents are in their late 80s. And at some point this is going to be an issue, and the conversation, Italian family can't concept the idea of actually put an institute, some kind of external service, but at some point someone's going to have to come into that family and start looking after her, because otherwise she won't survive once their mother or father or both have died.
That's right. Yeah.
And has no language skill other than the language skill she's got with her parents, because that's what she's seen. It's really quite scary. One of the other things we talked about is that you had over 100 sites, ECH. You not only cover, obviously, the metropolitan area of Adelaide, but way into the rural areas too.
We've certainly got some villages in more rural areas. So, for example, up on the York Peninsula and down onto the Fleurieu, out into the hills. We don't go currently as far down as the southeast Mount Gambier. And we don't go too far north, but that's something which is part of our sort of expansion as we're building more villages in order to meet the needs that are there.
So with a question about the practicalities as you want to expand and grow, how do you fund that? Because you are a not-for-profit.
Yeah, I mean, we have a particular model for our housing. So unlike most retirement villages where you're asked to pay the full value when you move in,
yes,
that's because the developer, the owner of the village, wants to make their return immediately.
Exactly.
We take a longer term view,
right,
and we look to make our return on our housing over 25 to 30 years.
Right.
And that's usually 2 or 3 turns of that property, because the average length that somebody stays in one of our houses is about 12 years.
Right.
And that gives us a different financial model. It also means that we ask people, should they move into one of our villages as a sort of owner-occupier, that they pay about a 30% of the market value of the property. So for many people, that's a really attractive option, because they're usually selling a house in that same neighbourhood, and then they're paying
a lot less,
and they pocket the difference to help them do the things they want to do as they're getting older. And as I say, we've got that rental option with about 25% of our houses rented, and our rental cost is around about 70 to 80% of the market rental value.
Right.
And again, that's part of our not-for-profit status and our meeting of need in the community.
With the rental properties, I assume that then the cost of maintenance, or, you know, light bulbs checks, all of those sort of things, just as part of a normal rental agreement. But if you own the property, then you would pay a fee for those services. So
our sort of weekly maintenance fee for somebody in one of our properties is around about $100. But that includes their white goods. So we look after your cooker, your fridge, your washing machine. We replace those, your insurances, your council tax.
Oh, wow.
You know, so that it's actually
such an economical way, very economical when you consider the cost of electricity and council rates and those sort of things at the moment.
So people who are living on our housing do feel they get some benefit from that, and that same maintenance fee is incorporated into the rental amount as well. So we don't distinguish between whether you're renting or whether you're owning. You own. It's all the same from our point of view. We treat you equally.
And do you like the retirement village concept that when you are the family, or I would imagine it would often be your the people that benefit from your will that would be then responsible for selling the property. Does it sell back to ECH?
Yeah, so what you're actually buying when you buy into a retirement village is a license to occupy. You don't buy the freehold of the property. And again, our contractual approach and why we're so successful is incredibly simple. So you pay one fee up front, and there are no hidden charges. We don't charge you to refurbish, to market, selling on to somebody else. If there is money owing to you because you've put an investment in as well as the basic fee, then we'll pay that back within 30 days of you handing the key back.
Wow.
Whereas the new legislation for retirement villages actually requires you to do that within 18 months.
Which is a long time of them using your money.
Exactly. So we do that within 30 days.
So if you have a situation, and that is also very important, isn't it, for those people that have gone into this situation, into an ECH property, but then something happens and then they need to go into a nursing home and they need to be able to get their cash to be able to fund that.
That's right.
And this is a really efficient way, because 18 months is a very long time.
And we know, which is an interesting piece of research we've been doing for a number of years now, is following residents who live in our housing and people who live in the general community. And we know that if you live in one of our houses, in one of our villages, and it does get to that point of you wanting or needing to go to a residential care home, on average, that's 7 years later if you're one of our residents compared to the general population.
David, I think that's a great note to leave it on. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for coming into the studio.
Pleasure.
That was David Panter, who is the CEO of ECH, and what an amazing story, and what a great way. If you're considering making that change, have a look at their website or ring Ask ECH.